Happy Tuesday, though I'm frozen on the side. Now it's working. Happy Tuesday, besties and bosses. How are you doing? How was your weekend? How is everything going? I feel like I have a very fun conversation. At least it's fun for me. I think this will be a fun conversation today, and all sorts of fun announcements to share with you. So let me share announcements, our giveaway, and then we will dive into today's topic where we're going to get real about the roles you're playing in and out of business, why this matters. I think I've got a slightly different perspective on this, and hopefully it'll be both permission giving, but also really useful for you to understand how to think like a CEO, show up like a CEO, understand what your business needs from you so you can both feel in integrity, feel authentic, but also get the results you want, because I think sometimes there can feel like a rub between the two. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Announcements. We have a masterclass in this group next week on Tuesday called Words That Sell. This is one of my favorite masterclasses. I have updated, I've taught this in the past and I've updated it since. And we are going to dive into literally the words you use to sell in your messaging, in your marketing. This is one of my favorite things on the strategy side that I think I have a different approach around, because I like to blend mindset along with the strategy piece. It's also one of my superpowers as a coach and something I'm helping clients with all the time, so they can really get clear on that unique edge they have to be able to stand out online. Because as we've been talking about in this group, it is great that it is a crowded space online. I'm so grateful for all of us, because that means there's a lot of people and a lot of opportunity, but it also means it's just that much harder to stand out. Anyone who's read Blue Ocean Strategy, we've got a little bit of a red ocean happening right now. So we're going to dive into that next week. It is completely free. If you sign up, you also get a bonus guide. It's a cheat sheet with over 200 words you can use to supercharge your content and copy. I think it's a really fun one to have, and it's an extra bonus for you. It's KimArgetsinger.com / I think it's words that sell. There's a link at the top of the group as well. I'll make sure we drop a link for that here if you want to join me for that. I would love to have you. Hey, Shari, nice to have you here. And thanks for joining this conversation. I'll be very interested to hear what you have to say, because I've got a slightly different take on what I'm sharing today. The other announcement for everyone, March 1st was my 7-year birthday, business birthday or anniversary, whatever we want to call that here. So it's so fun for anyone who's been in business for a second. It's so interesting how it both feels like, oh my gosh, I've been in the online space forever. I'm a dinosaur. And on the other side, it feels like I'm just getting started. So it's just a very interesting bit of bothness dichotomy there. I feel very much the same way with living in New York. I moved here 9 years ago. And even with my husband, we've been together 8 years now. So I'd be curious to hear from anyone if you feel the same. Shari says my 4 years on the 18th. Oh, we've got the same business birthday month. Happy birthday, business birthday to you. Be curious to hear if you feel like the same way, Shari. It's such an interesting thing where we can both feel like, oh yeah, I mean, 7 years ago I remember baby business Kim. I'm like, oh yeah, that was a very different place, but also it doesn't feel like that long ago at all. But in honor of that, I don't usually give away full length coaching sessions for obvious reasons, because I'm busy supporting clients. We have been giving away those mini sessions in the group, which you can find some threads still for a message up level session. But I'm going to give away one full length 100K CEO mindset and strategy session. I love doing these. These are where you get to completely get clear on what you and your business need. We will pick a topic, we will dive in and get really clear on what's going on for you, what's working, and close the right gap to help you set yourself up, whether it's on the mindset side or on the strategy side, to reach that first 6 figures or that next 6 figures in your business. Comment, say hi. If you're live, you will get priority over winning this, and we'll pick a winner and give that to someone. And that'll be my business birthday gift to myself. As I'm sure anyone who knows me in this group knows, coaching is basically the gift I give to myself all day, every day. So those are the announcements that we have going on in the group. And now we will dive into the meat and potatoes of today's conversation, said by a vegetarian. So, this conversation is one I've been sitting on, because I've been trying to figure out the best way to go about sharing this. Shari says, everybody can leave now. So funny. I love you. That's very funny. So today's conversation, I want to talk about the roles we're playing in and out of business and why this matters. I'm sure you've noticed, if you've been paying attention to my content in any way, shape, or form, I've been sharing more about my experience as an actress. I spent 10 years in Hollywood and Los Angeles doing the acting thing. I was in over a dozen indie films. Some were better than others. I worked at over a dozen commercials. I worked on some really top films on the production side. with some celebrity names. So I very much know that world. And it's the first place I really learned marketing and sales and business, because as an actress, you are a small business. And I've just been recently thinking about, especially as our space gets more crowded. And again, I do not think saturation is a bad thing at all. I think it is such a great thing because it means there is demand. And I mentioned Blue Ocean Strategy earlier. We are in a time where there is a bit more of a red ocean. If anyone doesn't know that book, it's a great book to read. But the concept, like shortened concept of blue ocean strategy to what I'm talking about here, is a red ocean means that there are a lot of businesses competing for the same market, for the same clients. And a blue ocean is when you can differentiate yourself and your value curve, and you create a blue ocean where it's not bloody. You are not trying to compete with others because you have created your own value curve, and so you are no longer competing with everyone who's in the red ocean. Just so you know, when I'm throwing these things out, I think it can be helpful just to understand what the heck I'm talking about. It's not necessarily what our conversation is about today, though if you're interested, we can share more about that and talk more about that, and I'll definitely be, that's part of the reason I'm doing next week's masterclass. But I've just been thinking about this a lot and thinking about how similar it is to the acting world, and that Los Angeles, Hollywood, I mean, there's the Hollywood industry here in New York as well. My husband's acting as well, so I'm very much entrenched now in that world from the other side, as someone who's supporting him. And it's a very similar space in that it is very crowded. It can feel very much like a red ocean where you're really looking at, how can I create a blue ocean? How can I stand out? How can I be different? So there's just been a lot of parallels I'm really seeing, particularly to our world right now, just to give context to why I'm bringing in more of those stories and examples. And I think it's just a perspective that's also more fun to talk about sometimes than just our online space all of the time. And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking about how in the acting world, there's something really interesting that happens that I think sometimes we miss in our space, that is really essential, and that I really see support those actors who go on to work and have really successful careers. And that's really understanding and being able to define both their role as a business owner, because as an actor you are a small business, and their role within a part and within a scene, and how there are so many talented actors, super talented, but who fail to stand out and who fail to book parts because, yes, they're very talented, but they don't understand how to define and own their role within a single part. And that has them basically rule themselves out of work, sabotage their work. They also don't know how to be in their role as a small business owner. So bringing this over here, and why I wanted to bring this today, and I'm going to break this down quite a bit, it just made me think about how as humans and as business owners, we are playing so many different roles all of the time. And what I know and what I see with the clients that I work with, and if you're here, I know you are heart-centered. I know you are caring. I know you care about integrity. I think I am the same way, right? These are some of my top values. I know you care about authenticity, like all top values of mine. I am a bleeding heart, probably to my own detriment sometimes, my husband might say, my coach would probably say as well, right? So I am you, I feel you, I get you if that is you. And I think what can happen when we come into the online space, when we start a business, is we can confuse who we are as individuals and as bleeding hearts and as people who care so much with what it means to run a business, and with what it means to be a CEO, and what it means to serve other humans, and with the role we need to be able to define and show up in our businesses. So that's what I want to talk about today, because I think what can often happen, and what I'm supporting clients with so often, is everything gets very enmeshed, and it can either feel like I get to be a good person, I get to be in integrity, I get to be authentic, or I have to like play this game or be someone I'm not, or I don't even know. I'm like so not cool, like not the cool kid. I don't know what the cool like trends are right now, but there's like always a new trending thing on Instagram. I feel like it feels like I have to like do something that feels really far away from who I am, and literally play a character, not be in the role of CEO, but like play a character to be able to make my business work. Or I have to like fake it until I make it, right? And I think the pendulum can really swing. And I find then if you are someone who's caring and heart-centered and cares about being a good human and authentic and all of these qualities that I value deeply, I only work with clients that way. I know if you're here, that's how you are. It can feel like this rub, and it can feel like you're in this double bind, and it can make you feel very stuck or feel like things is going to have to take forever for me. So I want to first just normalize that if that's something that comes up for you, and if that feels like great. Like, what am I supposed to do here? And I wanted to talk a little bit about a different way to think about how you can define and own your role as a CEO in business, and what I think about that, what I think that means, what I'm supporting clients with as we're talking about this and thinking like a business owner and a CEO and showing up in your business that way. Because that is really when I look at clients and when I look at what really supports them to having great success, it's very similar to Hollywood in that way where, oh, my clients are so smart, they're so talented. Like that is what they have got in spades. And a big difference maker for them is when they learn how to think like a CEO and treat their business in that way and show up in that way for their business. And again, treat their business like a business, I just see such a shift happen. But I think there can be so much resistance around that because a lot of times when we're thinking about thinking like a CEO and getting clear on what that means and showing up in that way, it can often feel very different than who we are maybe in our everyday life. So let me know as I'm talking through this, because I do think this is a slightly different way to think about this. So let me know if you have questions, or if you're like, Kim, you sound off your rocker, what are you talking about? Because I want to make sure that this is feeling clear. And I hope this is, again, both permission giving, but also very helpful for you in terms of how you can be of service, make a bigger impact, and get the results you want, and really do so in a very authentic way, but that has you show up in your business in a different way. So let me just pull my notes up, because I feel like otherwise I'm just going to want to like riff on 100 things for you. So I think if we just zoom out a little bit, just to understand this concept, what I'm talking about, defining, owning your role as a CEO, what I think can be helpful to think about is you don't need to no one needs to want to be an actor or an actress. This has nothing to do with that industry. I just think it's a helpful way for us to think outside of sometimes our own day-to-day life. But if you think about your day-to-day life, all of us are playing multiple roles all day long, right? I have the role here as I'm showing up to serve and to like have this conversation with you. I'm showing up in my role as a CEO. And this is one role. I have another role with my husband. I have a different role when I'm on my calls with my clients. In fact, I would say for most of my clients, I'm probably in a different role for most of them because there's a different dynamic there. There's a different scene, so to say, that's being played out. With my family, I'm in a different role. And within that role, I am still completely authentic to who I am, but I'm really understanding what the scene is and what the role requires for me to successfully complete that scene, if we're going to go with the acting analogy here. And if I go with the acting analogy, what I see happen and get very confusing, and my husband and I were talking about this recently, he booked, I shared this with y'all, he booked Law and Order just before the holidays, and my husband is one of the kindest humans you've ever met. I think I shared this probably on a live stream before. I feel like I'm remembering this conversation. We talked about this in a different way, but he's literally the person who, if we're in the city and it is like a double lane, like to cross the avenue kind of a street, and he sees someone fall on the other side of the street, he will cross in traffic to go help them. Like, he's literally the kindest like human that I've ever met, and the most thoughtful human. And he auditioned to basically be an asshole, a billionaire asshole. And what that role required for him was to understand who he needed to be to play that role, to serve the scene. And I'm sharing this as an example because what I would see other actors do that would rule them out from a part is they're like, okay, I can totally play an asshole, but I don't want them to actually think I'm an asshole. So let me also make sure I sneak in a little bit of my soft side. Or I wrote a post about this recently from another lens, if this is ringing a bell for anyone. Or conversely, they would want to see that this was a small part in a TV show. They're like, but I kind of want to see if maybe they'll consider me for a bigger part. So let me try to slip in some range and show them a couple different things for this role. And what would happen is, instead of getting really clear and defining and owning the role that was required to audition to complete that scene really successfully, either you're like, I want to show them that I'm something else personally as a human, or I want to show them that I could book a bigger part and make more money and get a bigger role. Let me show them more. And as soon as you're doing that, you're not defining and owning the role that's required in the scene. You're showing all of this stuff, and what happens is it's super fucking confusing, and you don't book the part because it doesn't make any sense. And that's what I see happen in our space a lot. I'm going to go through some examples of where I see this happening, but this is why I think it's so essential to start to understand and to start to see what are all the different roles you have in your life, and where can you still be authentic in all of those roles, right? When you're an actor, if you're doing a really good job acting, my husband is not an asshole, but when he's playing that part, he is authentically being an asshole. It's just a place where that's okay, and that's, a space has been created where that doesn't mean he is in the rest of his life. But if he wasn't owning and embodying that, he wouldn't be doing great acting. And so what I think can be helpful is to start to see what are the different roles you're playing, what does each role require you, as opposed to how can you try to bring all of you into each role, and to do the same with your business. So if we think of your role as a CEO, I'm sure we've talked about this in this group before, but I think so often what we can do with this, on the converse, we can do this with business, where we expect our business to be our everything, right? It's supposed to like pay us and fulfill us and like be our passion and be the thing that lights us up and be the thing that makes us feel safe and be the thing that gives us excitement and be the thing that is fun and be the thing that gives us freedom, right? We put all of these things on our business as opposed to what are the few things your business can give you. It's the same with your role as a CEO. Instead of getting clear on what's my role as a CEO within this part of my business, I think so often we can be like, well, but I'm also supposed to bring in, and I'm a mom, and I'm a wife, and I'm a really good friend, and I'm a daughter, and I'm a husband, whatever those things are. And we try to bring everything into one role. And that's when it can feel either like there's a lot of pressure on any one thing or very confusing to people on the other side. I'm going to go through examples of this because I think that might help this click a little bit more. And again, if you have questions or want clarification on anything, let me know. But essentially, I think an easy way to think about this is essentially your identity, but your CEO identity. So we talk about identity, and identity, if you're not really clear on the term, is essentially your identity encompasses all of your mindset. Your identity is how you see yourself, but also all of your fears, and your beliefs, and it sets the boundaries and parameters for what you will and won't create in your life, what you will and won't have in your life. And so I think as a human, we have an identity, but within your business, you also have an identity as a CEO. And oftentimes, your identity as a CEO is going to be different than your identity outside of the rest of your life. So for example, I'm just trying to think of which way I want to take this. I'll go through some examples. So for example, if I as a CEO, if I step into my identity as a CEO and I'm looking at making decisions and making investments, right? That is one area where I can get clear and define my role as a CEO and understand as a CEO, what is my thought process? What am I thinking about? How do I want to show up for this? And if I look at making decisions and investments as a CEO, when I'm in that role, I can be 100% authentic. I can be 100% in integrity, right? I'm not like suddenly a bad person if I slip into my role as a CEO, but I'm probably going to make very different decisions and different investments when I'm in my role as a CEO than I would as an individual when I'm stepping outside of my business. I recently made 2 large investments in my business, and they're more long game investments. And as a CEO, and the way I think about business, and when I'm coming from that lens and that strategic thinking, I think these are super smart investments, and it makes absolute sense for me as a CEO to use my business's, surplus to invest in these things. As a person, as Kim, this is all authentic, right? If I was trying to be authentically all of me, and I brought Kim, who's not a CEO, and like my personal money into this, and some of the personal things that I want to do with my life, there's no way I'd want to spend that much money on certain things. I'm like, no, there's like things I want in my personal life. And authentically, it feels way better to put money into the stock market or to buy something fun in the moment or to go on a trip. And all of that is true at the same time. And I think, again, what can happen and what can get very confusing in business is especially in small business, because we are small businesses, right? And we are often our own brand, and we want to we've been taught, like, bring all of you, be authentic into business. It can be very confusing, and it can feel like you're in, again, like this double bind, or there's a lot of conflict because part of you is like, why would I spend money on this thing? I want money for all of these other things. And then there's a part of you who might see, oh, this is a great decision. This is not a great decision. And I think this is where starting to see things as the role you're playing, and that does not mean fake, you get to be authentic in it, can be really helpful, as opposed to simply seeing it as an identity, because an identity, I think, starts to encompass all of who we are. But this is a segment of who you are for a segment of your life, which is your business. Your business is not you. Your business is not all of you, and can help you to then, if we look at this one section, get clear on, well, if I'm in my role as a CEO and thinking like a CEO, it's a lot easier to make a strategic decision that my business needs, or to make an investment that my business needs, as opposed to having all of these conflicting ideas from the different parts of who I am, because I'm a full-fledged human outside of my business as well. I'm going to go through some more examples here of where I see this show up. So I think content is probably your messaging and content. We're going to talk more about this next week, but I think this can be a place where understanding and defining your role as a CEO and who you are in your business and learning to show up as a CEO in your business and in your content can be such a game changer. And this is probably one of the biggest places I see people kind of muddy the waters for themselves and try to do what I was talking about, the exact acting example where it's like, okay, I am showing up in the role of CEO, but I want to show people I have range. And like, there's all of this to me, or I want to show them like, yes, I could help them with this one thing, but here are like the 75 other things I could help them with because I want to be considered for all of these different things. I can see things get very confusing because we're not clear on what our role is in our business and thinking like a business owner. We're thinking more from the place of like, let me just be authentic. Someone said be authentic. Someone said be vulnerable. Let me just word vomit a bunch of things out at people. And no shame if that's what anyone's doing. I'm sure I did that 7-year business birthday. I'm sure I did that 7 years ago. But I think this is something, I just spilled water everywhere. Hold on one second, y'all. Let's clean that up a moment. But I think this is one area that you can think about. What is your role as a CEO and what is your role within the content you're sharing? So if we look at content again, I think some of the messaging in our space can be, well, yes, to be authentic, of course, be authentic always, but the way I think about this is how can you be authentic within your role as a CEO and then within your content, as opposed to seeing authenticity to mean, and now I have to show every single part of me. I think sometimes with content, we'll see this when someone has been taught to be vulnerable. And look, I'm all for vulnerability. I love vulnerability. I think it's really powerful, but I think sometimes it can be harmful as well because people will be vulnerable at a time where it doesn't make sense for them to be vulnerable because they're still working on something, or it can be harmful to their business and their message because what they're being vulnerable about really doesn't really serve their role as a CEO, and their role as a CEO and showing up in their content is really about serving an audience. It's really serving your potential client. It's really about helping your people solve a problem, get the results they want, feel inspired, right? Build a relationship with you. And sometimes when we're trying to bring all of us in, right, we don't have that discernment because we just hear be vulnerable, be authentic, right? Bring all of this in, as opposed to, yes, be vulnerable, be authentic, but how can you do that within your role as a CEO and get really clear as to what your content, what your marketing, what your people need to hear from you? And I think within that, it starts to make it, I feel like professional is like the word none of us want to hear, but I think it just makes it a little bit more professional as opposed to a little bit all over the place. And it can be a little more focused and specific that way as well, which is only going to serve the impact your content has and the impact that you're having with your work. Just checking for, I don't have any comments here. But I would definitely say that is I think a place that you can play with that lens of what is, have I defined my role as a business owner? Have I defined my role as a CEO? Have I defined what that means in my content? Or am I just writing whatever comes to mind today or whatever I want to talk about? Which again, if you're showing up and like putting out content, that is amazing. You get high fives from me, especially if you're being consistent. But if you're looking at, oh, well, maybe my content isn't converting to the way I want, or I'm bringing in clients who aren't a great fit, or I don't understand why, I'm getting lots of people who are like liking my content, but they're not necessarily wanting to get on the phone with me. There could be a lot of reasons for this, but one of those reasons might be that you're showing up as all of you as opposed to who is the CEO in the business and what does that CEO want to get known for? What is that unique edge? We're talking about the blue and the red ocean, right? What's the blue ocean you want to create here? And what's the unique edge you want to share? And within that, what do your people need to hear from you or have authentically and vulnerably hear from you? Like within that, in that confined lens. I think another place this can come up. So again, I know if you are here, you are like my clients. I have like the nicest, most heart-centered, most caring humans in the world who like don't want to screw people over. So this can come up with pricing and with how they're packaging their offers. This can come up with things like having tough conversations with team members, with, sometimes unfortunately someone's not a fit and you might have to let them go. This can come up with having tough conversations with people in the sales process. And I think what can happen, again, here, this is where we want to look at how can we start to separate out who you are as a human and see, yes, you are all of you in the business. This isn't about being fake. It's not like suddenly like you, Kim, outside of the business is like the super nice person, and then in the business I'm suddenly a bitch. That's not what we're talking about. But Kim outside of business is probably going to be a little bit different than Kim as the CEO in her CEO role when I need to have a tough conversation with someone, or when I need to navigate what we're going to charge for certain services so that I can pay my team and I can pay myself and we can pay taxes and we can be a functioning business, right? That continues to get to show up and give lots of free content. Or when I'm looking at making decisions around where I'm allocating my time or setting boundaries. So again, I think this is where you get to start to play with, because I think what happens, and I feel like I keep saying this, but I think it's just so easy to start to see thinking of yourself as a CEO, meaning it is just you stepping into, I am now a CEO because I've started a business, and you've started a business, but I really am just wanting to invite everyone to start to think about, but what would I be if I'm getting into that role? Like literally, if you were going to audition for the role of a CEO in your own business, what would your business, if it was writing a script, if it was writing a character description, what would it need from you in your role? How would you define it? What would that, I don't want you to be a character, but like what would that role be thinking about? What would their thought process be? Because there is going to be a slight difference with, again, then how you're showing up versus if you just show up the way you would any given day. Got two more examples here that I think might just help keep having this land. I'm always mindful because I don't want to say anything that's triggering for other people, but I don't think this is necessarily triggering. I'm sure many of you know I lost my father a couple of years ago, and as a human, I was grieving. As a human, I had a lot I was navigating behind the scenes. So I moved home for a couple of months and ran my business from there, right? And as a human, if I'm being fully me and fully authentic, there was a lot there that I probably could have shared. As someone who's also like human daughter over here, and then also over here has the CEO role of being a coach and being a service provider and being someone who's running a business and paying a team, right? I had to really look at how can I show up in my role of a CEO for my business. It didn't mean I didn't share things with people, but it also meant that when I got into a call with my clients, for example, right, I need to show up in the role of coach, in the role as a CEO for that client, as opposed to maybe in the role of Kim, the daughter who's grieving. Similarly to if I did a live stream or if I was navigating something with my team. And I reflect that as an example. Please, if anyone is grieving or going through anything like that, take the time and space you need. I gave myself so much of that as a CEO. I also was mindful of my most valuable asset, which is me, and my most valuable employee, which is me. And I limited the number of clients we took on during that time, the number of hours we worked. I was a very smart CEO in that way. So please don't hear this this is not like shoved down feelings or anything like that. But I think that can just be a helpful example just to see that difference where all of that is true. And it really wouldn't have been serving for me to all over my content to share about this. I definitely shared about this, but to share when I was in the middle of processing or to share nonstop what was going on, it wouldn't have served me as an individual or for my business. And I hope this is a helpful example. And again, not triggering for anyone. And just so you can see that difference where both of those situations, both of those roles can be true, both of those roles can be authentic. But what happens so often is we enmesh everything together, and I think that can be where we have confusion in terms of even being able to make decisions for us personally. Whereas when we can get really clear again on what is your role as a CEO, what's your CEO level thinking, how can you show up, define that, own that, even within decisions like, okay, we're going to take less clients at this time, okay, we're going to put out less content at this time. I repurposed a lot of content during that time, and I don't think did any free trainings during that time, for just as some examples here, right? I scaled back my hours dramatically. I was able to make that decision for me as an individual because I was really clear on my role as a CEO and able to show up as a CEO to make those decisions for the business and for essentially my best employee, because I'm both the CEO and the employee. Shari says, okay, so how do we do a litmus test to see what CEO version of content would look like versus what we're doing now? Ooh, you have the best questions. So I think what would be helpful is to almost like rewind the tape and first think to first define like as a CEO, like when I'm in my role as a CEO, like let me check in, like am I in my role as a CEO or am I in my role as Kim or as Shari? When I'm in my role as a CEO, what do I really see that my audience needs to hear from me? What am I currently selling? And what do I think I need to speak to in order to sell that? What do I see my audience or my clients have as pain points right now that I want to speak to? What do I feel as a thought leader is really important to speak to in the industry? What do I see as some of the process that I see as, I mean, these are all things you know, but they really help my clients get results that I want to speak to. And then I would say you can revisit your content and see if you're taking a look at it, like almost like pretend someone else wrote it. But as the CEO running a business, when you're taking a look at it, you can check in, like, does this feel like it's feeding that brief, so to say, or just are we missing some of those connection points there? Or does this feel like maybe, and I think there's always room for about like, I don't know, 20% of content that's a little bit more personal, but really like seeing is this showing up in a way that is serving what the business needs? Or is this more showing up what different parts of me need, or where I'm like, because I think the other thing that can happen here, or am I trying to show too much in one piece of content? So I think that's the other lens you can use is, and this is something, I mean, I have to check in with myself as well. We know I'm long-winded. So what I might do is Kim might write content, and then I might go back through with my CEO lens and from the role of CEO and be like, okay, but am I sharing 15 things here because I am trying to do that actor thing where it's like the brief says play the bitch, but I'm like, but I want to also show you that I have range and I can like die later and that I can also be kind. Am I trying to share way too much in one piece of content? So I think you can do this through the editing lens as well to see where can I basically trim and make this more concise. So hopefully that answers that a little bit. And then I think another way to check in with this is the way I think about when we're in our CEO role. It's a lot more neutral, even if we're fired up about wanting to share something. I think sometimes we can be very adamant because we believe something so much, but it's a lot more neutral, I think, and strategic as a lens. Whereas sometimes when we're like content creation, for example, can be when we're not in our CEO role, can feel a little bit more either emotional or just less neutral, essentially. And whereas I think when we're doing it from the CEO lens and from that role, it's a little bit more of I am as a business owner, I have a goal that we are reaching with this content. Obviously, I want to be authentic within it. Obviously, I want to share from the heart and be vulnerable and share, but I want it is all in service of creating a pathway to reach a certain goal as opposed to just sharing like what feels good and true in the moment. I feel like it's clear we know each other, so I can say like I've seen enough of your content, so I know this is how you think about, and just from the content I've seen of yours, how you think about that. But I think that's a way you can think about that. Shari says, I think so. What I'm hearing you say is the CEO lenses here are speaking to pain points, your offer, showcasing your thought leadership within your industry, and seeing if those are being covered or not. Yeah, and seeing if you're speaking to the results, and seeing if your content is focused on the current sales goal in your business, I think would be just an easy way to think about it as well. So as a CEO, and when we're thinking about our business like a business, we always have different things we're selling and different things we're marketing. So I think that can be an easy way to look at it too. Like, am I keeping this in mind, and I want to be so mindful for anyone who's watching who's maybe in a different phase in business. For anyone who's watching a different phase in business, if you're just starting to put content out, like keep putting content out, build relationships. That is not wrong. And the more you can think about what is our current goal in our business that we are using our content to drive towards, the more you're coming from the CEO role and lens. I have my masterclass next month, so as a CEO, I'm thinking about what content are we putting, like how can we lead towards the goal of talking about words that sell or putting things out that speak to that masterclass. If I was launching, I think this is literally what you help clients with, Shari, but if I was launching a group program 3 months from now, right, as a CEO, as opposed to just putting out content, I would want to strategically think about what our content plan is that creates a pathway that starts to warm and prime people up for for that launch, even if it's a couple months down the road. And then what I would say within that is then just being really mindful, kind of what we were talking about here, of just being mindful within any piece of content that it is focused to the people you're serving and to the problems that they have and the results that they want to achieve or that they want to get from the content, versus, I'm trying to think of like what a good example here would be, because I think I've been doing this for so long, so I'm trying to think of what the opposite would be. So the opposite would be if I'm like, I'm super excited about, I'm trying to think of something that's like business adjacent, that I might have talked about in the past. Okay, so this is a good example. This is maybe a good example. So when I started my business, one of my most popular opt-ins was a hashtag cheat sheet and guide. And I was not in my role as a CEO when I created that guide. It was a great guide. I got probably the most signups ever for it. But that was very much coming from the mindset of, I'm trying to prove this is just something I learned. This is something I know. I know about Instagram. That's what I was using at the time. Let me try to prove to people I know this. Let me just like try to show up. Let me like just try to put something out there and get people on an email list, as opposed, and very much like being the actor who's like, I can do this part, and I can do this part, and I can do a little bit of this, but there was nothing focused or strategic about it. It was very much unfocused and very much not from a CEO lens of what do my people actually need to hear from me? What's actually within my zone of genius? What actually leads to the offers I sell? There's pretty much nothing outside of like, I guess you use hashtags as a business owner on Instagram. Like there was really no congruence there at all. So not hating on my past self, grew my email list, we all learn as we go. But I think that's a good example of, it was creating content. It was a very well-made opt-in. It built my list, but that was not made from someone who was thinking like a CEO. That was made from someone who is putting together things and hoping it would work, versus really taking that lens as a CEO for like, what does my business really need from me to put out and to like have a conversation around to bring in right fit people. Shari says, oh my God, I remember that often. I probably shared it with you. It's like, I should find it just to put it in the group just so I can make everyone who just feel good about the journey of business. Y'all, this was my first branding that I made myself, which I don't recommend. Hot pink. I hate the color pink, but hot pink and a hashtag guide. I mean, again, it couldn't be further away from like anything that makes sense. And outside of, it was an opt-in and it got people on my list. And so I think that's what I mean here. It's like we can get so confused in our space, and we're just like trying to bring all of us into something, or we're just like trying to slap things together. And I don't want to make this necessarily all about content, but this is just one example of, the more clear you get on your role as a CEO and define what that means and what it means to think like a CEO and show up and operate in your business from that place. I don't even know how many years ago that was at this point, but I'm just trying to think, I don't know that I could have had the maturity at that level of business to do this, but if I had, it just pause for a little bit with what we're talking about today, I would have been able to step back and see, even if I created a slightly different opt-in that might not get as many signups, as a CEO who's thinking from that lens, I can see how that would serve my business and my audience and everything so much more. And ironically, be far more authentic, because it would be more authentic to my work. Because something like a hashtag guide, of course, like that's just like an easy thing for people to sign up with. It's going to grow your list more quickly, but it's not in service of the end goal. And if I had stepped back, which I probably did a couple months later when I made a new freebie, but that would have been the CEO level thinking and approach. And I think that's maybe just a way to discern with content. And for everyone, this is not how do I make myself wrong? This is more, how can I start to see I actually do have a different role in my business, whereas just taking that moment to start to learn what that role is, to start to define what that identity is, to start to lean into practicing thinking that way, because that's how, oh gosh, this is I could go so cheesy with all the analogies, but that's how you can like get the Oscar in your business, right? Because you can be the like Oscar performing, and it's not a performance, I don't want to say it's performative, but CEO in your business, because you're doing that development on that way of thinking. And I know that sounds so cheesy, but if we think about the acting world, and if you were to land a movie role tomorrow, and this is something I know to be true. I shared this on the podcast. One of my first jobs in Hollywood in LA was working as a line reader for Anne Bancroft, and meaning I helped her memorize her lines and work on her lines with her, and I would go to her house and sit in her attic, and we'd work on those together. And by the time she got to set, she had spent so much time developing her role, and she went and she played a musician in the movie. This was the movie Spanglish, which is, I don't think, an appropriate name, but this was a long ass time ago. Not that that makes it okay, but there we have it. But she played she got sick, so she didn't end up finishing the movie, and they replaced her with Cloris Leachman. But she played a musician, and I think she was like a boozy musician. So she would go kind of undercover, because she was quite well known, to piano bars and stuff to study and to immerse herself in what that role was, along with what we worked on together. And I'm sharing this to say there was a lot of development on the role of what it meant to be that person, what it meant to think like that person, what it meant to show up like that person, so that on the day of, when she was on set, she could then just say the words and be that person, act like that person. And that's what the big picture thought process here I want to invite everyone to think about is, what she didn't do, what Anne Bancroft didn't do, was then get the role, memorize some lines, barely think about them, show up, and hope that that would have her slip into the role and deliver an amazing performance. She really did that work to think like, to be the role of what that was. And I think that's something that we all have an opportunity to do in business. This is something I'm supporting clients with. This is something I continue to do with my coach, because being a CEO, being a business owner, thinking about your business like a business and treating it that way, it is a slightly different role than you have in the rest of your life. It is a slightly different way of thinking than if you've ever worked in another job. It is literally a different way of thinking, right? If I used to be an employee, if I used to work for someone else, operating as an employee, thinking like a CEO and showing up in the role of a CEO as an employee, would have probably gotten me fired. I think at this point I've been in business long enough where I'm pretty much unhireable for that very reason, but that's because I've developed that role. And that's the piece I want to invite everyone to keep coming back to, because I think what happened is, because it feels separate and because it feels different and because it is a different way of thinking and it is a different identity to step into, and I think of the role development as this is literally what growth is. This is literally what rewiring your brain is. I think this is a beautiful thing and is an evolution and becoming the next level version of yourself. But it is creating something new. And I think that's where we get so much of a rub, because if you're heart-centered, if you're caring, if you want to be authentic, if you want to be in integrity, it can feel like, but I'm out of integrity if this is something new, if this is a new way of being, if this is a new way of thinking. If I was this way as an employee, doesn't that mean I'm being fake if I'm not thinking the same way as an employee as I would as a CEO? And what I want to offer is, there's nothing inauthentic about that. It's authentic if you're being authentic within the role you're playing. It's just being an employee literally requires you to play a different role than being a CEO does. Being a badass in a TV show versus being the lovelorn, I don't know, husband or wife, right? They literally just require you to be a different part of yourself in that role. And that's what I want to invite everyone to play with, because the more you can define, own, step into, be the CEO when you're in your business, what's great is that you also can just be a little more neutral. You don't bring in all your personal stuff, but the more you can also evolve your business, because you are thinking about it like a business. The other example that I thought might be helpful, just as a way to think about this, is just seeing how, because so much of what I hope is coming across here. I want to help you all understand how this can both be so authentic and also not all of who you are, right? You don't have to share all your personal things you don't want to share in your content. You can if you want to and if it's valuable. But with the content example, that's where you get to check in with, am I doing this from the place of CEO and what my audience needs and what my business needs, or am I doing this because someone told me I'm supposed to be vulnerable and share everything ever all over the place? That's not thinking like a CEO. And I think that's not actually serving your people very well, quite honestly, because you're asking them to caretake you, but that's a different conversation. But I think just even thinking about, I can use myself as an example because I do one-on-one work, so I think it's an easier lens to look at. But when I think about sales conversations and when I think about one-on-one conversations, even within my role as a CEO, I'm still playing a different role for pretty much every client and sales conversation I have. And that doesn't mean I'm not authentic. That doesn't mean I'm not in integrity. That doesn't mean that I'm not caring about each of those people. It's actually because I care so much about all of those people, and because I'm so authentically in the moment with each of those people as a CEO, that who I am changes a little bit for each person. So the same way, if I was acting, if I was authentically responding to a scene, I would be different in one scene than another, or like literally from take to take, because I'm responding to what's going on. I think about the last 3 clients that I've onboarded. If I go back and think about our sales conversations, they were 3 completely different sales conversations, and 3 different versions of me needed to show up for those. And I reflect that here because that was me in all of those. That was me authentic in all of those. That was absolutely who I will be for them and how I'm able to support them, and within integrity. But it was me as a CEO and in a different role for each of those people, because each person needed something very different to feel safe, to feel heard, to feel understood, to be able to move forward. And that wasn't me like being fake or trying to manipulate someone. It was literally responding to who was in front of me and what they needed. The same way that if I think about today, I had a couple different client conversations. I was a different version of myself. I was a different role even within being a CEO for each of those clients. I'm still me. I'm still bringing the same expertise to the table. I'm still completely authentic and within integrity, but each of those people they just have different needs. They have something different that they need from the conversation, from the work. And so I see, when you can really start to, I think that can be helpful, just like to see the nuance of the CEO role. When you can start to think about it that way, I think if anything, it's more authentic and it's more serving for your people. But I'm hoping as you're hearing this will give permission to everyone, because I think what happens again sometimes is we think either CEO, I think, is such a masculine word, even though I love it and I probably use it way too much. So I think then it can feel like, oh, that's masculine or too businessy. Or sales, you were different on each call. That means I have to like figure out how to manipulate people, or we go pendulum swings the other way. Like I need to have a script and only show up one way for everyone. And the same with clients. It's like, if you're not showing up exactly the same, there must be something wrong there. And I want to offer a perspective here where you're just playing roles all the time in your life, in and out of business, and your business just happens to ask different roles from you. And the more I think you can make friends with that and see, how can I develop this role, and see that is authentic and doing it right, the more I believe you're showing up professionally and really giving your business, your audience, your clients, your people what they need from a very authentic place of you that's just not confusing, because it's not bringing in all of the other things, right? If I think about those client calls today, I think it would have been very confusing if one client who really thrives on a little bit of like sparring tough love, and another client who really needs lots of space to be able to talk through something, to come to an idea, and another client who the way their brain works, right? They need something different from me. If I had brought in like the sparring kind of like fun jabbing one client really thrives off of, to another client who needs a lot of space to process, I literally would have, like, that would have been authentic, but I probably would have messed with that client's head in a really unproductive and unhelpful way. It would not have been serving at all. So that's what I just want to invite everyone to think about. How is trying to be everything for everyone? How is trying to show people you've got lots of range, you're so many different things? How is feeling like you need to be so available to show all of you? Because, and I think this can happen too with branding and messaging, right? Like, how do you show all of you authentically? How is some of that language maybe making it actually more challenging for you to be the authentic you within the moment that moment and your business requires of you? And how can you let this be permission to really trim it down, let it be more simple, let it honestly be a little bit easier? And show up for what the person in front of you or your business needs. And obviously, if you're on the client side, you get to like that's a different role too, right? If I show up with my coach, I'm in a completely different role as a client than I am when I am the coach. Like literally a role reversal. And I think even there, it's just so helpful to see like the more you can allow for that to be a different role, the more like that's when I can lean back and receive coaching instead of feeling like now I need to serve the person in front of me. Okay. I hope this was helpful. I hope this was interesting at the very least, but I hope this concept will land and just help everyone to have a slightly different way to think about things as you're navigating the what can feel like red waters online, and instead see that the way to creating a blue ocean and less bloody waters is not always to try to figure out how to be everything for everyone and to show all parts of you. And the more you can get clear on your specific role as a CEO, specifically what your audience needs at any moment and your clients need, and really to put the blinders on. That's what I love about Blue Ocean Strategy. It talks so much about how people who have, or businesses that have blue oceans beat the they beat the competition by not trying to beat the competition. And I think that's a lot of what we're talking about with this role here. And to see how when I'm sharing things, even where I'm talking about defining and tapping into your unique edge, and when I'm talking about words that sell, and we're talking about all of these things here, even within that, to see that your role as a CEO and your unique edge, these are things that do not have to then be like so wacky different. And like my husband didn't have to be the jerk and the asshole, and also showed that he was a loving, kind husband when he was auditioning for Law and Order. It just needs to be what you as a CEO and what your business need and what your audience and clients need from you, and it just gets to be that simple. I hope this simplifies it for you. I hope it's also a fun way, a different way to think about it, and a different way to think about stepping into that identity and relationship with your business. And hopefully also will help someone listening here see that you are not your business, so you can also, as the CEO, give yourself some time off, or give yourself that break and give yourself that as an individual, because you are both the CEO and the employee of your own business. And then remember, if you want to sign up for next week's masterclass, Words That Sell, I will drop a link. It's kimargetsinger.com/words-that-sell. This is one of my favorite classes. We are going to talk through, it is specifically your messaging and your words that sell, but we're going to look through this from a mindset and a strategy lens. So both your mindset and your audience's mindset, which is, I think, where this approach becomes a little bit different, so that you can tap into those words in a slightly different way and get a little more clarity on the nuance there to play with. And then the specific strategy you can blend in there so that you're really clear on the words you can use that don't sound like everyone else online, even if you're doing something very similar. So you can stand out about the noise and bring in more of those clients who are a really great fit for you and love you and your work and your CEO role. So I will drop a link for that. I would love to have you. I'll see you next week, and thank you for hanging for this conversation, and I love y'all. And Shari, thank you for all your questions. Bye.